welcome to, I don't know, this must be about the 5th of the GIF webinars, the Global Innovation Forum webinars on what's next, where we're tapping into our wonderful Global Innovation Forum community. I'm delighted to have with me today Dr. Myriam Sidibe, who's going to be talking to us about brands on a mission. And I will hand over to you, Myriam, in just a moment, but I've got some housekeeping, I suppose, to get through first. My name, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Tom Ellis. I've been chairing the Global Innovation Forum for the last 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit more, but I don't like to admit to it. And I'm CEO at a consultancy called Brand Genetics. We specialize in front-end insight and innovation. And we work with brands to solve a lot of complex problems, to help them unlock growth by finding a new perspective on their world. And that's a human-first perspective. How can we help solve people's real problems, not just consumer problems, but people's real problems? And that's part of the reason I'm so excited today to be hearing from Myriam and understanding much more about her thinking and her journey in this whole world of brands on a mission. Now, Myriam, or well, to give her full title, Dr. Myriam Sidibe is one of the world's leading experts in brands that drive health outcomes through mass behavioral change. At Unilever, she worked with the iconic Lifebuoy brand, creating a movement to bring hand washing to kind of the population, really. And I think you achieved 1 billion people sort of washing their hands and moving that whole shift in behavior with tremendous health outcomes. And her TED talk has been watched millions of times, or certainly considerable large number over the years, and rather prescient, sadly, in today's period of coronavirus, that you were telling us back in 2014 that we should be washing our hands. And maybe if the world had listened a little bit more carefully, we would not be in quite such a difficult situation. But Myriam has worked in the public sector, she's worked in the private sector, but what she does brilliantly is argue for a much more transparent relationship between for-profit and not-for-profit sectors, and finding ways that businesses can gain growth and profit from engagement in social and health issues, but at the same time use that to build more sustainable, more effective interventions. So Myriam's now left Unilever. She is the founder of Brands on a Mission, the author of the book, and she'll be talking to us about that in just a moment. She's a senior fellow at Harvard Kennedy School as well. I'm not quite sure where you find the time, Myriam. You're all over the sort of media. And, you know, it's a great pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Tom. This is it's a real pleasure to be here and to be able to give this talk at the Global Innovation Forum. It's I've been looking forward to the forum and the event that you were going to host. So I look forward to November, and I look forward to the discussion today as well, because I think we've got quite a lot in common, especially this drive to put things through the private sector and see how we can galvanize and support through the private sector. Just one clarification: I haven't left Unilever yet. I'm on sabbatical officially until the 1st of August. So I'm enjoying all my various titles while they last for now. But yes, it's a forever kind of story with a company that I've spent over 15 years with, and that has trained me at the core to think about purpose. So what I'm going to share with this team today, and I'm going to share my screen in a bit as well, is I'm going to share my journey of trying to be an entrepreneur, obviously in one of the most and best recognized company in terms of driving purpose through brands. And then I'm hoping that I can share with this team some of my learnings, some of my experiences, and some of my background as well, that I obviously have shared through my book. Please, you can show the book because you've got a copy. Lucky you.
Hot off the press. A highly recommended read.
Thank you very much. And so I'm going to share a bit of this, and then that should take about 20 to 25 minutes and maybe a little exercise. So I am going to encourage the audience to put questions in the chat box, and also to think about and reflect as I'm speaking about the current brand or company where they're working with, and then see whether there is an opportunity to really showcase or tell us about their brand purpose and what they're trying to achieve in terms of the social mission that their brand or company stands for. So just keep thinking about that. I think that would be good. And then please share in the chat. And we will then pick this up when we get into the question and answers and the conversation. So I will now share my screen.
And just, Myriam, while you're doing that, just to clarify, if people can, the chat box, there will be points at which I think you ask people to fill that in. But for questions, please log them as you go in the Q&A function, which you'll find on the bottom right, because that's just a little easier for us to manage.
Okay, perfect. So can you see me, hear me, all okay as I start? All right, perfect. So look, I have spent 20 years dreaming of ways to get people to wash their hands with soap. It's just, the most cost-effective public health intervention there is. But it took COVID-19 to get people to listen. Hand washing with soap is the best line of defense against COVID-19, and it will remain so, even probably until after we discover a vaccine. So for me, health and well-being is the foundation of social justice, and it is the most rewarding business investment in every sense of the term. And the years that I have spent studying brands with purpose have focused around health and well-being, and I concluded what many others probably have done. It pays to be good, just as simple as that, and you'll see why I call these brands on a mission. But you know what, I'm going to take things and take the conversation a bit further with you today is to tell you how you can really make the good pay. Health and well-being ranges from, promoting hand washing with soap to general hygiene, to better nutrition, to safer sex, to tackling self-esteem due to body confidence. I would go further and say that racism is a public health issue. It's a mental health issue, it's a disease, it's preconditioned, and it has to be tackled with the same level of consuming energy. So if you look at the recent events that we've seen in the US, that only make that much, much more apparent. The deep roots of inequalities must be tackled. And I believe, and I have believed over the last 15 years, in pioneering new ways to address health and well-being, and I have experienced firsthand what brands can do to address them. I call the brands that stand up brands on a mission. And brands that do will come out of this well. Others will fall fast and they'll fall far. So these past few weeks on the streets of America have taught us that it takes years of commitment and dedication to be a brand on mission. If you look at Ben & Jerry's and what Ben & Jerry's is doing and how they can speak with confidence and authority on America's current reality since the civil rights movement, it's because they have supported work towards racial equality on so many fronts. Whether you're looking at education, you're looking at housing inequality, you're looking at income inequality, or the criminal justice system. And this sensitivity is reflected on their board. They've supported work among Indigenous Americans too. I mean, financially, with legal aid protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline, for example. They've worked with the LGBTQI community. In 1989, long before it was legally required, they extended health benefits to partners of their LGBTQ employee. They have credibility across the board, and that work has been rewarded. Without having to make a long, elaborate statements on how the profit would be used, they launched a new ice cream flavor in the middle of the George Floyd protests, Justice Remixed. And their customers have welcomed it with open arms. I believe that brands that need to get on a mission as a business imperative or be left behind. And in this talk, I'm going to show you how you distinguish real mission from what I call purpose washing or window dressing. And I'm going to show you how to do it. The mere fact that you're listening to me means that you are probably one of the believers. You are interested probably in transforming businesses from within. You are interested in tapping into innovations to solve some of the social issues. Now let's put some of your commitments into work. And I'm going to give you some concrete ways to translate your ideals into tangible ways to be good. So we've chosen to make that change through the power of business. And key to that is demonstrating that it pays to be good. In the last 2 minutes that I've started this speech, Over 24 children under 5 have died, largely of preventable disease. And this is fundamentally wrong. It's not just sanitation though. Whether you're looking at malnutrition, including obesity, as well as undernourishment, it affects 1 in 3 people. Oral disease, such as cavities, are the biggest causes of school absenteeism and probably of low work productivity. Well, I guess that's changing a bit in COVID-19 at the moment. But, if you look at the 37 million people that are still living with HIV/AIDS, if you look at the 80% of girls that express body dissatisfaction, often leading to low self-esteem, depression, substance abuse, you will find that toxic masculinity, unhealthy stereotypes are fueling a rise in depression amongst young men alongside domestic violence. Many of these issues, as far as I'm concerned, can be addressed by changing habits and attitudes. An estimated 2/3 of healthcare costs are driven by lifestyle choices. We know that people at risk of HIV infection should use condoms, that we should all wash our hands with soap, brush our teeth before going to sleep, and that we should exercise more and eat better. Yet we often don't behave in our own best interest. And we know what's good for us, but we often act otherwise. And it is this disconnect between these desirable health-promoting behaviors and our actual day-to-day habits that's the source of many of the world's most pressing public health challenges. And I think brands on a mission can right some of those wrongs. Marketing as a discipline can make consumption conscientious and improve both society as a whole and individual customers. Many brands have come around to the idea of purpose. The Business Roundtable just recently issued a statement on the purpose of a corporation, signed by 181 of the CEOs of the largest US corporation. It concluded, each of our stakeholders is essential. We commit to deliver value to all of them for the future success of our companies, our communities, and our country. This represents a clear move from shareholders to stakeholders, ranging from employees to communities in which they operate. If you look at BlackRock's Larry Fink, he recently told the company in which he invests that profits is in no way inconsistent with purpose. In fact, profits and purpose are linked. And if you look at some of the corporations that are becoming larger than some nation states, we need a new model of enlightened capitalism, as been stated by many before me, whether it is Paul Collier or Paul Pullman or Colin Mayer, for example. But the real question I'm asking today is, how do we link real business models with alleviating real suffering? And what can brands and marketing really do to help? Profits, while essential over time, are not people's most or main motivators. Stating a purpose for a brand is one thing, and there has to be action behind it as well. I mean, if you think about the billions of dollars that food manufacturers and food companies, for example, have contributed to actually rising obesity and heart disease. Today, corporations are arguably the most responsible for some of the most serious health and diseases in this world that people face. And alone, I believe, they have the global power, the reach, and the authority to change that. So now, my mission in life is to show them an alternative in which doing good is still profitable, and that we could change the current dynamic. The purpose journey that I'm going to share with you today does just that. Brands on a mission go beyond talk. They strive for direct impact. I like to distinguish what I call brand say versus brand do. Terms that I widely use at Unilever where I have worked for about 15 years. Brand say basically involves communicating to consumers about social purpose. Brand do is about translating that purpose into actually addressing social problem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this baobab that you see behind me here to help you transfer your burning commitment into this reality from brand say into brand do. Now, if you use this method to define your purpose and encourage your colleagues to do so, you'll be obliged to think deeply about your purpose and to start to live it. But first, a story. When I was 10 years old, I fell in a septic tank. So that's me with my sibling there in Mali. I couldn't get out. I flailed around in the dark, screaming for help, sure I would die. I nearly drowned in shit. I still remember the taste, the smell, the shame, like it was yesterday. It remains one of the worst days of my life. But it probably was one of the best days of my life. It kicked off my career in health and hygiene, a career that has taken me all around the world, from London to Bujumbura, from Boston to Mumbai, from public to private sector. I think because I fell in that toilet septic tank, I was inspired to do what I'm asking you to do. I was motivated to spend decades of my life getting rid of shit, literally. You know, whether it was by building toilets in refugee camps or washing hands, this is the do-good part. Of course, I didn't want anyone else to have that same hellish sensation and that near-death experience, that burning shame. But most importantly, what I could do was also to relate to the 2 billion people that still lack a toilet. But there's much more to my career than that. I've been very lucky. I've studied at some of the world's greatest universities. I started my professional life in an NGO in Burundi, building toilets and hand washing facilities in war-zone countries. Many of them remained unused, as people preferred open air to our toilets, often using them for dried grains. Something just didn't feel right. We kept talking about beneficiaries, a term that bothered me deeply. So did the constant focus on the donors who paid for everything. Our success mainly depended on our ability to count the number of toilets we constructed, our grant applications for funding, and those grants measured success by how many toilets were still standing. But I just kept seeing so many empty toilets, you know, as the beneficiaries were not using them. I wondered, was my career going to be a constant chase of donor money to build unused toilets? Was I going to make decisions for powerless people? As a young African woman, I wanted to be part of the development of my continent. But my work felt undignified. And I felt extremely, it felt extremely not empowering enough. And, and for the beneficiaries, it just felt that, I was just responding to what donors wanted, not necessarily what they wanted. So, I kept asking myself, if the humanitarian work wasn't for me, what else was there? And, I went back to school. I equipped myself with a doctorate in public health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Spent a few years researching and monitoring children coming out of school, or rather not washing hands. I presented my findings to the company who had funded my research, Unilever. They offered me a job. And then I fell in love. I fell in love not with a fancy marketeer, but with a word. Crazy as this sounds, the word was consumer. I realized that Unilever didn't treat its audiences as beneficiaries, but as consumers. Instead of offering hand-me-down and PTs, Unilever treated it treated consumers, however vulnerable they might be, as with respect and dignity. That's because consumers have a choice. They choose with their wallet what to do with their money. The same young African women in rural villages that the aid sector was calling beneficiaries, Unilever was calling consumers, and dedicated all its time, its resources, and its bright mind to understand what fragrance of soap might appeal to her, and what color of soap might she want, and what packaging would work for her. For me, this was a really exciting moment. It changed everything. I went from giving resources to beneficiaries in Burundi who had no choice, to making solutions attractive to consumers who did have a choice. However humble their circumstances, they had a choice. And by doing so, I have achieved so much more than I think I could have achieved in the public sector alone. I joined the marketing team instead of the CSR team or corporate communication team. I wanted to learn everything about the 4 Ps: the product, the price, the place, the promotion, understand the packaging that would trigger a mother to want to wash her hands, understand how you influence affordable but profitable pricing, the right advertising that will get her to wash her hands. This would all come to nothing if I hadn't prepared myself. But it seemed like my upbringing, I was ready to be able to bridge all those different worlds. You know, I grew up with parents that spent their entire professional life, you know, working to help people escape from poverty. And they could not see what kind of career I could have in a corporation. To be honest, I'm still trying to figure that out myself, but that's a different talk. Many have called me combative, difficult, the guardian of the good. You know, but I believe that if you're going to be fighting for saving lives, it requires that level of passion. And I think today I'm convinced it requires a level of blending of disciplines. So my 15 years of Unilever have given me this fantastic platform from which to combat the naysayers. And 10 of those have been on Lifebuoy, the world's largest antibacterial soap. In 2008, we co-founded Global Handwashing Day, an advocacy day now recognized by the UN and celebrated every 15th of October by 500 million people in over 100 countries. We developed the School of Five, a hand-washing program for schools that has been translated into 19 languages to reach 450 million children in 35 countries. I spearheaded a movement, as Tom mentioned earlier, to change the behavior of 1 billion people over the past 10 years. And we achieved it as a team. By setting enormous goals and using them to motivate the vast corporations, I've been able to achieve some of my life's dreams of using brands to reach people at scale and with impact. I can't claim to have seen COVID-19, but one thing is sure, is the preparation that we've had with Unilever and Lifebuoy soap and the messages that we've drafted have become increasingly important in the context of this pandemic. Washing hands does save lives. And soap makers are frontline workers. They are the makers of hope. That one incident in the septic tank, that sinking feeling, the taste and the shame, took me from Bamako to New York, from Geneva to Nairobi. And as I traveled with Unilever, I learned an important skill, the skill of persuasion. I persuaded the board of Unilever, many people in the public sector, even our rivals in P&G and Arby's. We persuaded them all that putting hand washing at the forefront of their agenda was absolutely critical. And it worked. Lifebuoy has grown over fivefold in the last 10 years. And now I'm going to show you how we did it. And, you know, and most importantly, I believe that you can do it too. My model is a baobab tree. And again, referring to my African roots as well. So if you look at what this baobab actually does, it's a purpose tree with 5 main roots, known as the tree of life. Baobabs provide shelter, clothing, food, and water. And all major decisions are taken in their shade. I water the roots of my tree, fertilize and nurture them as necessary, and you should too. The roots are root number 1. How can marketing drive behavior change and instill positive norms? You know, if I take a couple of examples that I've had the chance to work on, you know, looking at Knorr, for example, we devised a brilliant campaign to address anemia by using local celebrity, TV advertising, song and dance, encouraging mothers to cook popular beef stew with their daughters and show them using iron-boosted bouillon cubes and plenty of green vegetables. So, you know, South African beer brands, you know, for example, Carling Black Label, created champion men, groups of champion men, which basically equips men with values to tackle toxic masculinity. And that is helping to modify the behaviors and tackle gender-based violence. Route number 2 is how can you develop partnerships that give your business model scale and depth? And here there's so many partnerships in my book that I talk about. But you know, whether you're looking at Arby's, Durex Condom has done great work, for example, on this. You know, partnering with MTV to encourage young people to talk openly about sex, to transform the taboos around it. But I'm going to return to Lifebuoy here. Very simply because our partnerships with governments and organizations such as Site Savers, was key. Were key in terms of allowing us to reach the 1 billion people. There is no way we could have done it alone. Washing of your hands and face, for example, to reduce trachoma by 60%, with Site Savers is absolutely key. And the millions that we managed to reach in the 33 countries that we ended up reaching. So if you look at route number 3, for me, it's how do you drive a real systemic change with brand advocacy? And how do you stand for causes that are going to be bigger than yourself? And here I'm going to take an example that, most don't think about insurance companies as a purpose-led company per se. But, if you look at Discovery, a financial services group in South Africa, is a great example of this. They've used their Vitality Insurance brand to encourage good health behaviors. They incentivize people to go to the gym, track their health, well-being, and engage in communal support. Doing all those 3 leads to substantial amount, discount in health insurance products, and obviously great improvement in public health. If you think about what they've done or what they're pledging to do, they're pledging to support the WHO goal of getting 100 million people to be 20% more active by 2025. And they're doing this with other insurers. That's what I call creating systemic change. So route number 4 for me is measuring your success, because you measure what you treasure. And for that, I look at brands at 3 different levels, and I look at measuring success at 3 different levels. First, at brand level, we're all in business. We need to make sure that this is profitable, whether it's aligning to a social mission to actually driving penetration, volume, brand love, all the key business measures that you're looking at. At company level, is it helping you to retain employees? Is it driving more innovation because of the length of time that people are spending and putting this amazing marketing brains to the work towards a social issue? And I believe if you get this right, you can really see that change. And at the 3rd level, is it getting you into the public sector? Awards that you would have never gotten, blending financing models that you're creating. The brands that have embraced this have done so much better than those that have been left behind. And everything about the Unilever model is actually showing that. If you look at route number 5, how do you use that measurement to galvanize your company? And to drive real internal support. I think we've been very lucky. If I take Lifebuoy and Unilever, to have had obviously, CEOs from, Paul Polman, visionary, to then, Alan Job continuing the legacy and embracing it even further. I can't tell you the number of red t-shirts I've put on Paul Polman. He traveled the world, washing hands with school children, shaking hands with first ladies around the world, and promoting the Lifebuoy brand with government and thought leader. And, and this has allowed us to show the benefits of our mission across the company. It was an all-in approach, so we know the entire corporation supported us. So I believe that if you address the 5 roots of this baobab tree, you can grow your brand from brand say to brand do. And just like what we did. And here, each one of you is here because you believe somehow that the private sector has a role to play. And we understand how hard it is to do this in our everyday life. Now, if I go back to Lifebuoy, we were very lucky. We had a head start. Lifebuoy was a 100-year-old brand born in Victorian England to address a cholera epidemic. Public health and hygiene is at its DNA. So convincing a brand to address hand washing with soap, is easier than many other products or brand. But, I was blessed with an amazing blueprint in the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan and great bosses, inspirational bosses who took chances on some bold goals. But also I've been proven right by the measurements. I believe it's just so important. I think it may sound cynical to take advantage of COVID-19, a pandemic that has killed many and affected us all. But if there's ever been a time to turn a crisis into an opportunity, that time is now. COVID-19 and George Floyd shows us that it pays to be good, that it's the time for a reset. Brands must have moral values to survive. I live in Kenya, and we have a rich entrepreneurial culture here with millions of young people who create and embrace technology. We're the Savannah Valley in Africa, a huge resource for Africa. We found ways to battle the epidemic, and my latest creation has been the National Business Compact on COVID-19. which is, brands on a mission at large. We've joined together a group of Kenyan businesses, the UN family, NGOs, and COVID-19 has presented us with a ready-made mission. We've made hand-washing signs in many languages using popular cartoon, sent hand-washing facilities all around the country. Our campaigns have reached, over 50% of the populations. But, if you look at the SDGs and the poster behind me, you think that there's so many SDGs that can guide us and guide the brands and the businesses in which you are, and in terms of tailoring the kind of impact that you can drive. People are having still a lot of sex and stay at home all day, and they cannot get free condoms because of the lockdown. Look at goal-free health and well-being. Can this help Durex targeted? People are still thinking about, how to get themselves fed in the lockdown. And as I was saying earlier on, we are suffering because, the fact that, so much of the economy is an informal economy where people eat what they've earned that day. So can you think about goal number 2 on zero hunger and figure out ways in which employments can be created, for example, on some of the trades that young people can actually do? Women have been trading pads for sex. Again, looking at goal number 5 here, and then you'll see about SDG number 5 around gender equality. Could that guide Kimberly-Clark and Kotex on how to address this? But what does it look like to achieve credibility on an issue? For me, when I think about some of the brands that have been caught flat-footed and are scrambling to talk about race when they have no moral authority to do so. Short-term support for racial minorities may mean statements of support or donation to social justice movement. But you need to look at it in longer-term measures. And this will have to start with your in-house re-examining the composition of your boards and your leadership team. It will mean recruiting Black professionals and proactively creating safe spaces for them to work effectively and thrive. And, I think of, I've been voted the top 10 entrepreneur in the world. I speak very often on entrepreneurship, in trying to change the business from within. We end up being the dreamers who do, right? We lead people from brand say to brand do, and we have to prove to our colleagues almost constantly that it pays to be good and that we deserve to be at the table. But I think if you focus on this baobab tree, these 5 essential roots, you can make positive change in the world. And I think, we're looking at brands on a mission. Brands on a mission are the future of corporate America, future of corporate Africa, and the future of the corporate world. And I think the baobab tree is a way to inspire your brand to be able to track real impact and proving that it pays to be good. And I think with that, you'll be able to reduce the number of children who die second by second, day by day, and year by year for no reason that cannot be fixed. So for me, this is where I will end, Tom. And I know we want to keep some time for questions, but there's only one point that I'd like the audience to actually think about, is, to reflect about what social mission best fits with their brand, and that's aligned with an SDG indicator. Because I think, getting that right as a starting point and identifying what your social purpose is will make a lot of sense. So what I would say is, for example, if you can address a social problem that intersects with your business and organizations, and think about, what does, for example, a way to articulate this would be, brand Y is going to work on X social issues by contributing Z. So if I take Lifebuoy, you say Lifebuoy is going to work on SDG child mortality reduction by contributing 1 billion people regularly washing their hands. So that would be the sentence. So is there a way the team can actually, people that are listening can actually think about what that eventual sentence would look like? So what is your brand going to try to tackle, and by contributing what? And I think the clearer you make that link, the better it will be for all of us. And then what I have is a very simple framework to double check what people are actually saying. So I don't know, Tom, if you want to come in here to maybe see what are there any interesting social mission that people are actually sharing that maybe we could help talk about, or we can just jump in straight into the conversation. And I will wrap up with maybe the key questions on checking whether your social mission actually helps drive your purpose is actually driving your business, or it's well aligned to making a real contribution.
Yeah, thank you, Myriam. Thank you, Myriam. Fantastic. What would be great is if anyone who is working for a brand that is either engaged with a, sorry, I thought you're getting this back. But yeah, what would be great is if anyone is working with a brand that has a social mission or is engaged in working up what that might be, anonymously or not, if you pop that in the chat, I'm sure we'd love to see that. We've got a question, Myriam. You've given a couple of examples of brands working on the social development goals, or the sustainable development goals, sorry, from the UN. Are there any others that you can bring through? Christelle was interested to know.
Yes, I think I was muted. So you were asking me, I just want to recap your question. You were asking which other goals might exist or ways to be able to align your purpose into social impact?
The question was really about, can you give examples of businesses and or brands that have done well in terms of using the sustainable development goals for the brand and social enterprise?
Well, I have to say they tend to stay very top level. So they will say, for example, I am Knorr Bouillon Cube. I want to address, nutrition, and I want to do zero hunger, and stay right there. I think my key question and my pushback to a lot of these brands is to go deeper, because I believe that, under each of the SDGs are indicators, right? So if you look at, for example, health and well-being, under health and well-being is a sub-indicator, or an indicator that's about reducing the child mortality. Okay, so that's a very specific one. And then the reducing child mortality, we're going to go as deep as saying we're going to reduce neonatal mortality reduction, which is, making sure that babies that are born in the first 28 days don't die. And we know that, for example, hand washing with soap, reduces neonatal mortality reduction by over 45%. So you know that right from the start. So you're going to then design programs that are about, reaching out clinics, reaching out new moms from the moment that they give birth, from the moment that they go home, to make sure that their child is gaining extra protection during these first 28 days. And this is what I'm asking brands to do, is not to stay superficial, and not to say, well, we're aligning to UN SDG goals, without actually putting real KPIs that is linked to really driving real impact. And I think this is the part that really is going to make the distinction between driving it at purpose level versus the brand do example. And I think for me, this is what I'm trying to advocate, is that we don't stay at a brand say level, but we really take it down to what you need to actually really do.
Fantastic. We've got a few just coming in, but I just draw people's attention, if I may, to the work of Pete over here, who's illustrating beautifully so much of what you've been saying, Myriam, in this fantastic picture.
It's amazing.
So Pete will be live illustrating, as you can see. Pete works for Live Illustration, and as we go, is bringing this through. We'll make this available to everyone as well. It's a great mnemonic to capture a lot of these key themes, and we'll be coming back to Pete throughout. But you can flick back and forth if you can operate Zoom like my 7-year-old son. You can do wonderful things with Zoom. If you can operate it like me, you're a bit stuck. But Myriam, we had sort of people coming in with social missions here, one of them being about helping small entrepreneurs to be more creative and boost their business. Now, this is from obviously someone who's in a very different situation to a Unilever, but they're a designer. Again, people finding their own purpose, their own mission. Maybe for some of us, the sort of UN type goals feel like they perhaps are overly ambitious, but this model seems like it's applicable sort of at both a major cultural level, but also at a much smaller level. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I don't think you should be frightened by by, number one, you shouldn't be threatened by the SDG goals. The whole point is that they were created to be inclusive of the private sector. It's about identifying how you're going to be able to develop a model which is contributing positively. And this is what my movement is about, around brands on a mission, on inspiring, catalyzing, and more business models across a variety of private sector to be able to then deliver and be counted towards the SDGs. So I think the second part on the framework of the brand do and brand say and the baobab tree is that it's applicable for any size. It's just a great checklist. And if you look at my book and you look at what exactly I'm giving, it's a very handheld exercises in terms of, is this social mission applicable and right for you? And I think this is what I will end with later on, because then you can almost checklist and say, okay, so wait, I've chosen this. I want to stand for, I don't know, growing, more trees, which is a great thing. But is it really aligned to my business? And is this the right thing that I should be doing? And is this really aligned to me if I wanted to work with lingeries? And this is where I am. Should I be thinking about employing more women? Should I be thinking about, maybe growing body confidence and self-esteem of girls across the world? Is there a way in which for my design I can improve? Is there another SDG that is more aligned to my business so that it keeps my business resilient and it keeps my business also alive, even in times of crisis, because I'm not so off from, the how aligned my purpose to my brand is. I think that's one of the key elements that we need to think about.
There's a couple of great questions here, and to a degree, I think, and I hope I'm not doing them a disservice, but to a degree, there's the question which you talked about with purpose washing. And when some of these things feel a bit bolted on, it seems to me selecting, uncovering, discovering, whatever the right term is, that right mission, that right focus for your brand, where you can be genuinely impactful, but also credible, is half the battle, right? Not, if you don't get that right, then because one of the questions is, given that so many brands now, or brands should really be waking up to the fact that you can do good and earn, drive growth from doing good as well. The two can go hand in hand. Why are so many brands struggling to make that sort of clear mission, even within Unilever, right?
No, I think we're still working. It's hard. I mean, if you look at, currently how the business is doing, and you're looking at some of the brands, the first thing that, we're still working hard is embedding the purpose as core to the brand as possible. And I think the more aligned the purpose is to what the brand stands for, or the more chances you are to keep the commitment for a long period of time, and the authenticity, so that you can learn and bring it back and keep your innovation fresh, to keep your advertising fresh, to keep your ability to tap into some of this that you wouldn't normally do. And I think that's where I see the real distinction between brands that, and also that will be forced to drop it next year when, there's a big question. Then they're like, well, if you are a soap and you're thinking about hand washing with soap, there's still quite a lot of work, as you've just heard, on trying to tackle neonatal mortality reduction and getting new moms programs within a soap growth and business strategy. And that is still, it's going to be easier to keep that alive, find partners that are going to keep you going, than if you go and choose something that is not aligned to your purpose. And I think that is what I keep saying, is you start with that. But we have other examples, and if you look at the HBR article, that if you pick up HBR this month, I'm the #1 contributor on the cover with Marketing Meets Mission. So you should pick up this article. And I talk a lot about Carling Black Label and the kind of work that I've done. I haven't done it, but I have researched on #NoExcuses. And what Carling has actually done in parts of South Africa, training men, thinking about that and thinking about how they scale that up. Now, one could say that it's extremely hypocritical for brands that sell alcohol, which is the #1 contributor of harmful use of alcohol, to tackle that. One could say, well, let's see whether they can build that across everything, from coming up with no alcohol beer, reducing and putting their smart drinking goals at the heart of this, being very targeted in their advertising so that they're not actually going straight to market to some of the broken societies that exist, that have been suffering from, leftover, apartheid and non-employment and broken families. So I think that's the kind of conversations that one needs to be thinking about. Can you identify this, and identifying your right purpose when you're thinking? And I believe that 80% of, and you've heard my talk, that health and well-being is probably the most important thing that exists, and it's the foundation of social justice. So if you're thinking about a purpose that is aligned to social justice, most likely you're going to end up in the health and well-being space anyway, whether you're talking about toxic masculinity, mental health, or hygiene, sanitation, nutrition, even gender equality and gender-based violence to an extent is also health and well-being. So I think there is an element, and I believe that if therefore the private sector and a brand decides to adopt one of these purposes and they're going to, let's say, benefits from it, there's an expectations, and I think it's not asking for too much to make sure that they are really driving genuine impact and that they are committed in a medium to long term, because I think that's critical. You can't decide to test things on something as critical as life savings. I don't think that is very ethical.
No, and consumers pretty quickly see through this. I mean, I think if you're picking a purpose up and you're dropping it sort of next year, like an ad campaign, which probably isn't good creative ad campaign anyway, let alone with purpose, then it's very, very different thing. To what extent do you believe, because again, I've seen this debate hold up, that your purpose needs to be communicated through advertising, through kind of all the kind of normal brand touch points, versus done as almost a separate campaign? I'll take Dove as an example. Real beauty has been so at the heart of it, but the campaign for sort of body image and things like that's done through a slightly separate foundation, isn't it? So the two work very much hand in hand.
So real beauty is the brand say, right? And the self-confidence workshops and educating 35 million girls is the brand do.
Okay.
Where you're actively thinking about how, and they're doing many things, right? Even working with Steven Universe right now, so you don't have to do it all hands-on workshop. But I think the moment you start thinking that if I can help girls build their body confidence, and there is a way in which, through evidence, looking at what academics have done, what else can we create that is yours? You create a competitive advantage where, consumers are going to see the distinction between a brand who genuinely believes in this because of the innovations that's going to transpire in almost everything, from the advertising to, the packaging, the purchase intent, the formulations, the fact that more girls and more families will know that this has happened. And we've seen that, there's only so much you can do in terms of creativity and keep fueling it for years. And the brands that really succeed and do it over and over again, they could be the one-off that you've done well, but to do it over and over again, it's because you've been committed and you've therefore kept it at the center of the culture of your brand. So this is what we all stand for. We believe in it. We stand for this. We're not afraid to be sitting at the table across, practitioner in the public sector and I talk about, brands using more, swords than using shields, because using shields means you're hiding one part of what you stand for. Whereas using swords means you're out there, you deserve, you want a space at the table, and you're willing to put the work for it. And I think that is what makes all the difference.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely see that. You've touched on COVID, you've touched on the Black Lives Matter protests, and to a degree, in my opinion, at any rate, brands and businesses responded a lot more positively with sword in hand to COVID, actually getting out there and doing some genuinely positive things, whether that was switching production to hand sanitizer, whether that was like Unilever donating a huge amount of hygiene materials, etc. Whereas Black Lives Matter seems to have almost been a bit of a social media, we'll put a post up there stating that we believe in this. Do you think that that there is a difference between the two and the way brands should be responding, or is one harder than the other to solve? Or are we, yeah, I don't know. What would you be advising?
I think it's hard because, to really stand for racial equality, you're going to have to show, the color of your board. You're going to have to pull up or shut up, So it's this is not a purpose you just, stand up and just, claim overnight, right? So I think this is something that you're going to have to really be, either take up a position of education, making sure that you are doing some really responsible communication around it, and that, and maybe you're doing more listening than you're doing talking in this time.
Yeah.
And, and sometimes that's also fine. And I think, and I've just written a piece that just came out today in the Entrepreneur, actually, on brands should take a stand and how to do that responsibly. And I think that's one of the key things that I address is like, how do you do that? Do you, like, it's important to do the controversial, but at the same time, it's important to back that up with real action as well. And you've seen what Nike has done, and then, really thinking about, how many of your core team members are really, Black people as well, how much, Black talent are you really helping nurture, helping thrive. So I think it's a very complex issue because it's at the core of the inequality of actually around a lot of the places in the world, not just in the US, but I think it's much more apparent in the US. And what COVID-19 has shown is that, very simply, Black people are dying, double the number than white people. So, so if you just look at this, it's very, very clear in terms of, what needs to be done. So I think it's much more complex, and it requires, it's not every brand is going to stand, and take racial equality as its purpose, but it should take it as its moral value anyway, because it's the right thing to do, and actually to be really rich in your advertising and everything else. Like, I don't see how, given, for example, if you're a Nike or an Adidas and your Black community is the number one, a percentage of consumers, you need more Black people around you. I think it helps in driving this, and I don't even understand that we still have to make that business case. It's just so apparent, and so clear. But anyway, it's still a hard one.
Well, we talk a lot about empathy and the power of empathy, but there are limits to empathy. And, I can do my best to put myself in the shoes of a young Black man in America. I can talk to him, I can, talk to him in French, but I'm not. And ultimately there is a limit to that, and you need to find ways to have those people, give them a voice at the top table, give them a voice in all sorts of different ways. And as you say, it pays, it's been shown, increased creativity, increased profit. So again, I think a lot of these arguments have been had and been shown. One thing I do feel companies are wary of is this, and equally, I think the public and the media sometimes backlash on, in my opinion, potentially unfairly, is they aren't perfect, and they may not even be very good, but they start on a journey saying, for example, we believe in actually doing good things for the environment, but what, at the moment, half our things come out in single-use plastic. Yeah. So how do they go on that journey from, we're not there yet, but we're going to, do you have to have got some miles under the belt before you announce your purpose externally? Or should you just say, this is what we're going to do, and then back that up with action next?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think for me, to be honest, I think brands shouldn't talk until they've done something. And when you talk, you should be able to at least learn something, done your homework properly, and just make sure that you're doing that, with authenticity, because otherwise I think it will backfire very quickly. I do think that you need to have a clear plan. So number one, you need externally communicated goals are one thing, but then that's a great thing to start with so that it keeps you accountable. But, one of the things that I've done a lot over the last 15 years is also give small rewards almost to my teams, as we were going, saying, we're progressing in this journey. We have done 15 million people, and we're going to go to the UN, and you're going to get a chance to speak about it, and you're going to talk about it, and people are going to recognize you, and that gets us to the next bit, which is the 150 million, for example. Yeah. And I think it's important to create a culture of doing good and also putting them into because marketeers especially are terrible with that. The moment that things get a bit complicated, they'll just back away from it. And then there's also this need constantly to be like, we've created the newest best thing, right? So I think it's important to say that, when it comes to saving lives or improving or purpose, it's a marathon. This is not a sprint, and it's about constantly learning. And then, there's an entire ecosystem of public sector players that are doing some great work. So you're not going to do this in isolation. Yeah. It's about finding the right coalitions that are going to enable you to get the depth and the scale that you're looking for. And I think that's, for me, is something that is absolutely critical. So you can do that. I think what's important is to create your goal, communicate it externally, and then, and get to a point where, you can keep yourself and your team accountable. And I think that's a really good way to end this, by sharing back my screen and taking the team through my list of what I consider being a good. Can you see it?
Please go for it. And whilst you're just before you do that, we've got a question in from Matt Oakley about sort of driving purpose from outside of the C-suite. I think you answer this in your book, just to give your book a plug, which I've been enjoying, and about sort of how do you overcome obstacles within the corporation. So if we don't have time for it now, Matt, I suggest it's chapter 12, Winning Support Within the Corporation, is well worth a read, because I don't think, Matt, you would be alone in feeling that there are more risk-averse people within the organization. And I think finding and marshalling these arguments is one of the things Myriam has done so successfully. So whether it's the HBR article or any of her other material, I think you'll find a lot of genuinely practical guidance onto how to really own this and take it forward. Even if you're a junior brand manager, I genuinely think Myriam's example, as much as anything, shows how you can, as a person on a mission, help your brand, help your business take this up. And you know what? If they're not listening, are you in the right place?
It's a very good point. A very good point. And every time, I have to say, this is why I've stayed in Unilever 15 years, is that every time I got to that level of frustration, somehow something unlocked. And then I was like, okay, all right, these people, genuinely still believe in this. So, but, don't make no mistake, it's a really hard path to take, the path to want to do good whilst driving business. Because, you will get disappointed, but you need to learn to build your argument, and you need to learn to make yourself a bit of a linchpin in your organization. I think it's absolutely critical. And I think my book helps a bit on that. And hopefully you don't need to go all the way to Harvard to show that, and you don't need to write the book to do that, and you don't need to do that. But, sometimes it takes that. And, and that's why, the enlightened capitalism with the right leadership and courageous leaders is absolutely critical. So if I look at...
Yes, go for it.
No, so I just want to make sure that for the people that are... So if you've got your social goal in front of you, and then you think about what you've identified. So I would say, for example, like, you need to double check whether or not, this social goal needs you and needs your brand's involvement. Even if other brands are focused on the same goal, is there a way in which you would tackle this differently? And does it really need your brand involvement? And if it doesn't, I would really rethink about this. I think that can you see? Is it aligned to your brand's core purpose? And give yourself a 1 to 5 scale. And you'll find, this exercise in my book as well. But I think it's a good way for you to think about what you're trying to do. Is it likely to have significant impact, for example, affecting a large numbers of lives? I mean, nobody wants to set out on a purpose that is not about to drive, significant impact. So think about it and say, is this something nice that I could do that is beyond my neighborhood community intervention? There's nothing wrong with that. But is that what your social goal for your brand should be? Is it achievable? And maybe not in whole, but then in discrete changes. and stages that your brand can be part of. And if you think about the neonatal mortality reduction or the child mortality, we started with neonatal. Then we did some programs with mothers. Then you moved on and you said, what can we do with carers in the home for, over 5? And what do you do with schools programs? So you need to think about, what are you doing that is going to be able to be achievable and in discrete stages? Will it yield results that are likely to be visible to the company stakeholders? Like, is that possible to actually do that? Will it be considered worthwhile by your stakeholders? So if all your stakeholders come to every meeting and say, this is actually a complete waste of our time, it's good to get some initial excitement, where they see some sort of, give you the mileage to at least get the journey started. Will it cost an amount within what the company wants to spend? Because I think that's very important. We all start on a purpose, and then we recognize that if we have to rebuild the entire infrastructure of the company to be able to respond meaningfully to that social goal, then I'm not sure we're on the right track. Will it boost innovations on your product lines? And I've seen that over and over again. I mean, like the fact that we've embraced hand washing with soap, for example, and the fact that we wanted to reduce mortality and child mortality has been, like you've seen it in almost like the hand washing products that we've done, the advertising, the fact that, even on COVID-19, we would go out and advertise and saying, Lifebuoy, use Lifebuoy, but use any other brands, for example, so that, you are clear that your purpose is at the core of your strategy. And is it aligned to the company's wider strategic interest? So I think it will help to be able to get exactly that alignment within the company that you're looking for in order to get the right resources that you really want to. And then finally, is it the targets of government, NGOs, and foundations that could actually be valuable partners? So I think for me, this is important elements and statements that I've seen through the years that really make a difference. And I think another one which is always great is, could it open future markets for the brand? So if you've managed to scale this on a 1 to 5 for your brand, and then you say, okay, if you've scored at least 30, you're on to something. If you've scored less than 30, I would really suggest that you go back to the drawing board and think about another social purpose.
Myriam, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. And for such a practical guide, as well as taking us through your own personal story and journey. I'm going to say it again. This is a great book for anyone who is taking their brand on a mission. It's I think probably the de facto Bible at the moment. And I think that there's great lessons in there, great case studies as well. So all that remains for me, I'm going to thank Myriam and Pete in a moment, but this is the penultimate of the webinar series, I think. The last webinar with Frank Stevenson, the iconic car designer from McLaren, Ferrari, Mini, is in conversation with Ben Strutt on Thursday. You can sign up on the website. Pete, thank you so much for your effort. Maybe we can take a look at the picture. This picture, I'm sure, will be published, but also the video of this call, this webinar, will be on the YouTube channel from tomorrow, so you can get access to that as well and share that with any colleagues who couldn't make it. And last, but certainly by no means least, Myriam, thank you so much for your time, for beaming in from Kenya, where I'm sure you've got plenty of important things that you could be doing, but for helping spread the word of this. I can tell you're incredibly passionate, but also knowledgeable and practical about it. And that blend is very rare. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Tom. And thank you so much, Max. I have enjoyed today, and I look forward to getting this live illustration. I can't wait to post it. Thank you so much. It's amazing. It looks great, and keep up the great work. And I hope we continue collaborating.
Thank you, everyone.